The desert was wide, endless, and merciless. A sea of red sand stretched toward the horizon, broken only by towering canyon walls that glowed golden under the late afternoon sun. The air shimmered with heat, and every breath tasted like dust and stone. A lone cowboy trudged forward, his boots dragging, his shirt clinging with sweat. He wasn't much to look at, hat tilted low to hide tired eyes, vest worn thin, revolver at his side but rarely fired. Just another drifter, nameless and forgettable in the great silence of the West. Yet something had drawn him here. Whispers, stories told by drunk men in saloons, stories of a canyon where the wine carried voices and where shadows weren't shadows at all. They spoke of giant stall warriors of Apache blood who were more legend than flesh. The cowboy had laughed once at such talk, but as he stepped deeper into the canyon, where the light bent strangely and echoes seemed to answer back, laughter had no place left. He stopped suddenly. Ahead, framed between two massive cliffs, a figure stood waiting. At first, he thought it a trick of the light until the figure moved. She was no illusion. She was tall, towering above him, shoulders broad, arms sculpted by years of survival. Her long black hair shimmered like obsidian, decorated with a single feather that caught the sunlight. Her clothes were not the stiff uniforms of townsfolk, but soft leather, fringed and shaped to her body as if grown from the earth itself. A belt circled her waist, heavy with beads, feathers, and tools that seemed half weapon, half ritual. The cowboy's mouth went dry. His boots refused to move, though his heart pounded like a drum. The woman's eyes found him, dark and sharp, carrying the weight of something ancient. She did not speak at first, only watched him as one studies a hawk circling too close to its nest. When at last he forced words from his throat, they came out rough, broken by awe. "What happens if I touch you?" The canyon went silent. Not even the wind dared stir. For a long moment, it was only the cowboy's breath, ragged and shallow, against the crushing stillness of stone. Then she smiled. It was not a cruel smile, nor a mocking one. It was steady, knowing, a smile that carried both danger and promise. Her voice, when it came, rolled low and deep, rich as thunder rumbling over distant hills. "You would not be the same man." The cowboy shivered. His mind told him to turn, to run, to flee this place where men did not belong. But his heart, the same heart that had led him wandering, searching for meaning he could never name, told him to stay. And so he did, rooted to the canyon floor, staring up at the giant Apache woman as though the world itself had stopped turning. The cowboy's chest rose and fell as though he had run 1,000 miles, though his boots had not moved an inch. Her words wrapped around him, heavy yet magnetic, pulling him deeper into the canyon's spell. She stepped closer, and with each stride, the ground seemed to tremble beneath her. Dust curled upward as if the very earth bowed to her presence. He wanted to speak, to ask her who she was, why she lingered here in the emptiness, but his tongue clung stubbornly to the roof of his mouth. She circled him slowly, her eyes studying him with the patience of a hunter measuring prey. Yet there was no cruelty in her gaze, only the sharpness of someone who had lived long, enough to see through masks and false bravado. "You are far from your people," she said at last, her words deep and measured, every syllable carrying the cadence of a forgotten song. "And yet you walk into the canyon of echoes where even brave men fear to tread. Why?" The cowboy swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I don't rightly know," he admitted. "Maybe I was looking for something. Maybe I was running from everything else." Her smile deepened, though it held no softness. The desert swallows men who do not know who they are. Some vanish, others are remade. Her hand brushed the canyon wall as she passed him, long fingers tracing symbols carved ages ago. The cowboy's eyes followed the marking spirals, animals, lines that seemed to dance in the fading light. He felt smaller than ever, as if the stone itself carried secrets meant to outlast empires. When she stopped in front of him again, the sun framed her silhouette, turning her into a figure of fire and shadow. "You asked what happens if you touch me," she said, voice rising like the canyon wind. "But the real question, cowboy, is what happens if I touch you?" The words sank deep, and for the first time, he felt fear not of her strength, but of the change she promised. He thought of the saloons where he wasted nights, of faces he couldn't remember, of the endless drifting that had left him hollow. Perhaps this was why he had come. Perhaps this was the answer. He lifted his chin, his voice steadier than before. "Then touch me," he whispered. Her eyes flashed, a spark of approval or perhaps warning. She raised her hand, slow, deliberate, her shadow swallowing his small frame. Just before her fingers brushed his chest, she paused, letting him feel the weight of the moment. The canyon seemed to hold its breath once more, and in that suspended silence, the cowboy understood. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Her hand lingered in the air, a breath away from his chest. The cowboy felt the heat radiating from her skin before contact was ever made, as though she carried the warmth of the desert sun within her. His heartbeat pounded loud in his ears, faster than any galloping horse, and yet he did not move away. Something rooted him to the spot: curiosity, awe, maybe even destiny. At last, her fingertips brushed lightly against the leather of his vest. It was not a rough touch, not the crushing grip he half expected from someone so much larger than him. Instead, it was deliberate, controlled, filled with the kind of strength that didn't need to prove itself. A spark shot through him, sharp and hot, and he staggered back a step, gasping. Visions flashed in his mind: mountains rising from the earth, storms tearing across endless plains, rivers that once roared with life before turning to dust. He saw warriors painted in red and black, chanting beneath a sky split by lightning. He saw children laughing around campfires, women weaving stories into cloth, elders staring into flames that spoke of the future. The weight of centuries pressed into him in a single heartbeat, and yet he could not pull away. Her voice anchored him, deep and steady. "You feel it, my people's strength, my ancestors' fire. To touch me is to touch them all." The cowboy sank to his knees, overwhelmed. His hat slipped from his head, landing in the dirt. He had spent his life as a drifter, a shadow moving from one dusty town to the next, never belonging anywhere. But now, for the first time, he felt tethered to her, to this canyon, to something far greater than himself. His throat tightened, words breaking apart like dry wood. "I don't deserve this." She crouched low, bringing her towering form closer until her eyes locked with his. They burned with intensity, yet there was a gentleness there too. The desert does not care who deserves. It only tests who survives. "You came here. That is enough." Her hand rested on his shoulder now, firmer, grounding him. "But understand this, cowboy, the path you walked ends here. If you follow me, you will not return the same man. The world outside will not know you. They will not understand you." The weight of her words pressed harder than her hand. He thought of the empty towns, the gamblers, the women who barely remembered his name, the endless search for something he couldn't name. Perhaps losing that life wasn't loss at all, perhaps it was freedom. He looked up at her, dust clinging to his face, eyes fierce despite the trembling in his body. "Then let me walk your path." For the first time, her smile softened. It was still powerful, still commanding, but it carried warmth, acceptance. She nodded once, slowly, as if sealing an agreement older than time itself. "Then rise," she said, "for the desert has chosen you." The cowboy rose slowly, his knees unsteady, but his spirit steadier than it had ever been. Dust clung to his clothes, sweat streaked down his face, yet he felt different, lighter and heavier at once, as though something had been poured into him that both lifted and anchored his soul. The giant Apache woman watched, her gaze sharp as a hawk's, but there was no judgment in her eyes, only the quiet patience of someone who had seen men break and rise before. She turned without another word, motioning for him to follow. Her strides were long, each step echoing in the canyon like a drumbeat. He hurried to keep pace, boots crunching on stone, his shadow swallowed by hers. They moved deeper, past walls painted with stories etched by hands long gone. Animals, spirals, battles all alive in the flickering light that shifted as the sun slid lower in the sky. The cowboy slowed to study them, but she did not pause. "These walls remember," she said, her voice carrying easily across the space. "Every triumph, every sorrow, every promise. To walk here is to walk with them." He felt the carvings almost hum beneath his fingertips. When he brushed against the stone, the connection was faint, yet undeniable, as if the canyon itself acknowledged his presence. It both unsettled and steadied him. They came to a wide opening where the cliffs bowed inward, forming a natural chamber. A fire pit sat at its center, ringed by stones, cold now but ready to be lit. She stopped and turned to him. her towering frame catching the last blaze of the setting sun. "Here you will begin," she said. "Begin what?" he asked, his voice hushed. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but not in anger. "Begin becoming. The man who entered this canyon is gone. You asked what happens if you touch me. Now you will learn what happens if I touch your spirit." He felt a shiver run through him. The words weren't a threat, but a promise, and promises in this place felt as binding as iron chains. He swallowed, not at once, and lowered himself by the fire pit. She crouched across from him, her movements fluid despite her massive size, and for the first time he felt less like a stranger and more like a student. As darkness crept in, stars piercing the sky one by one, the air cooled and the canyon's silence grew heavier. He stared at her across the unlit pit, knowing that this night would mark a dividing line in his life. Everything before would fade into shadow. Everything after would carry the mark of this woman, this canyon, this moment. And though a part of him trembled, another part burned brighter than ever. For the first time, he was no longer drifting. He had found something worth following, even if it meant stepping into a world he could not yet understand. Above them, the stars glittered like watchful eyes, as though the ancestors themselves leaned close to witness. The cowboy drew in a steady breath. Whatever came next, he would not turn back.